Carlos, Telefonica and Mozilla have announced a partnership to develop a WebOS-based operating system, Firefox OS, that's based on HTML5. But what's so special about HTML5?
So HTML5, as the name indicates, is the fifth version of HTML, which is the language of the web and was invented 20 years ago by Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and is what web developers use to produce web applications. So HTML5 is actually an umbrella term for a number of technologies like JavaScript, CSS, HTML itself, etc., that has the promise of being the version of HTML that will actually run very well across multiple devices, including mobile devices, because it has a lot of improvements for accessing device capabilities, for working offline without internet connectivity, etc., that are needed to run efficiently on mobile devices.
So when did you first get together with Mozilla?
Well, so we were working on a WebOS project based on HTML5, and at that time using WebKit as the underlying browser. And we came out with the announcement of Mozilla doing Boot2Gecko, which was a similar approach of building a WebOS using the Gecko rendering engine from Firefox into mobile. And we decided that it was much better to join forces, so we contacted them, exchange prototypes and technology approach. And then we decided to blend both of the projects. We had done a lot of work on extending HTML5 from the APIs. They obviously had a lot of expertise on the rendering engine side and the core browser technology, because they're a browser company. They were extremely open to work and collaborate with us from the very beginning. It's been a wonderful experience working with them. We decided to join forces, put the engineering team and the UX team together, working towards accelerating the development to bring the first version of Firefox OS to market.
What makes you think that an HTML5-based operating system is viable? Because, let's face it, Palm and subsequently HP, they didn't get it to work.
So Palm was the first attempt to do a WebOS, but the first version of Palm was not entirely WebOS, because it actually had bits and pieces from their underlying OS, which was not a WebOS. It had some native app APIs versus the web APIs, and that led into developers needed to use more than web technologies and also having some performance issues. This has been entirely built from the beginning as a WebOS using just HTML5 as the only way to develop applications. It's very lightweight and runs very well on hardware. And I think at this moment in the industry, everyone is looking for alternatives to the existing platforms for a number of reasons, and not just operators, but also OEMs, chipset manufacturers, etc. And on the other hand, developers are suffering the fragmentation existing and have more willingness to use web technologies as a way to eliminate the existing fragmentation. So we think that the time is right now.
Now, Telefonica says that handsets made to operate Firefox OS will be cheaper than their Android counterparts. Why is this? Is this an IPR issue, or is it to do with hardware costs?
Of course, it's about selling connectivity, because our core business is to sell connectivity, and that's going to remain the core business for the foreseeable future. And we need to do a lot of things to stimulate connectivity. And in the mobile space, it's not about the device cost only, but it's also about how much people actually use internet services on that device. And what we're seeing is for those really low-end devices, then they don't drive connectivity usage because the user experience is not very good. So what we think is that we can actually bring to market a device that not only has a price point similar to the low-end Android devices, but actually has a much better user experience and much better access to the open mobile web, and that will drive more connectivity usage. And why we think we can do that? Well, as I said before, this is an entirely WebOS built from the ground up using web technology. So it has a very lightweight OS that doesn't require much processing power, much memory. Therefore, less processing power, requires a smaller battery, etc., that drives down the build of materials of the device. And that's why we think that with the same hardware we can run more efficiently, or to get the same performance we can use less powerful hardware.
So there's no patent licensing costs involved?
There's no patents involved, there's no royalty fees. It's truly open source from both the software side and also the governance side. So if anyone wants to participate in the project, they're welcome to do. They just need to put engineers and start working with us. How much of the patents are paying the other OSs, I don't know. That's something you need to ask the OEMs, because they are the ones that know. But I can guarantee you that they're not going to have to pay anything with this OS, because it's entirely free and open.
Where is the market for Firefox OS devices?
Well, we think the market is where the market is underserved. So if you think about the disruptive innovation theories, you shouldn't be fighting against where the incumbents are fighting. This is similar to what happened on the gaming market with PlayStation fighting Xbox, Sony and Microsoft, and then suddenly Nintendo Wii came from the low end and came up with the Wii, which was a very different value proposition, a much lower price point and less performance, but that then open up gaming to a lot of new users. We think that on the smartphone space, we're seeing a similar thing. There's a fight at the high end between Apple and Google on the software side and Apple and Samsung on the hardware side, and we think that the low end is being underserved. Yes, it's true that there's low-end smartphone devices, but then that's not where the focus is. And we think that by focusing on that part of the market where we have a huge amount of customers that still haven't had a smartphone, we can then proliferate this OS.
And finally, does this have any impact on the work you've been doing in the past with WAC?
Well, so the original idea of doing this came actually from our work with WAC, because WAC, if you remember, was trying to build a web runtime that will run across multiple devices, and my engineering team actually participated in the technical spec and development of WAC, and the insight about using HTML5 came from that work, because the web runtime of WAC was built on HTML5, and therefore that led to realizing, well, we can actually build a web OS using HTML5, because once you've extended to be able to replicate native applications, you can build the whole font stack on top of the web. And so WAC was a really great source of inspiration for this project.
Carlos, Domingo, thank you very much indeed.